Hello, dear reader. My name is Elowen, and this is the story of how a single moment shattered my world, and how I clawed my way back from the ruins. I once believed in love, in promises whispered under starlit skies, in a future built on trust. But life has a way of teaching you that trust can be a fragile thing, and love can hide a blade. This is not a tale of defeat, though. It's a story of fire, born from betrayal, fueled by truth, and blazing toward justice. Let me take you back to the day it all began, when a crumpled $20 bill became the price of my dignity. The kitchen smelled of fresh basil and simmering tomato sauce, a meal I'd spent hours preparing to celebrate the news I could barely contain. My hands trembled as I set the table, the pregnancy test tucked in my pocket like a secret treasure, 2 pink lines, proof of the life growing inside me, the dream Thane and I had shared during late-night talks in our tiny apartment. I could still hear his voice, soft and certain, saying, "Alawan, you'll be the best mother. I can't wait to meet our kid." That was only 3 months ago, when his hazel eyes still sparkled with something I thought was love. When Thane walked through the door that evening, his shoulders were slumped, his tie loosened like he'd had a rough day at the law firm. I greeted him with a nervous smile, my heart pounding. "Thane, I have something to tell you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I pulled out the test, holding it up like a trophy. "We're going to be parents." The air shifted, heavy and cold, like a storm rolling in. Thane's face didn't light up. He didn't laugh or pull me into his arms. Instead, he stared at the test, his jaw tightening, his eyes narrowing into slits. "You're kidding, right?" he said, his voice low, almost a growl. I blinked, confused. "No, I'm serious. I took 3 tests to be sure. Thane, this is our baby." My words felt fragile, like they might break under the weight of his gaze. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh that cut through me like glass. "Our baby," he mocked, stepping closer, his shadow looming over me. "You think I'm that stupid, Alawan? That's not my kid." The words hit like a slap, stealing my breath. "What are you talking about?" I stammered, my hands instinctively pressing against my stomach. "We've been together for years. Of course it's yours." Thane didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and fished out a single crumpled $20 bill. He tossed it onto the table, where it landed next to the pregnancy test, its edges curling like a taunt. "Take this," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Pack your things and get out. I'm done with you and your lies." I stared at the bill, my vision blurring with tears. $20. That was what he thought I was worth, what he thought our child was worth. The basil-scented air turned sour, the warmth of the kitchen replaced by a chill that sank into my bones. "Thane, please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Why are you doing this? We planned this. We wanted this." He turned away, grabbing his coat from the hook by the door. "You wanted this," he spat. "You probably thought a baby would trap me, keep me stuck in this pathetic life. Well, I'm not falling for it." He opened the door, pausing just long enough to deliver one final blow. "Don't be here when I get back." The door slammed shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. I sank to the floor, the $20 bill staring up at me like a cruel joke. My hands shook as I touched my belly, feeling the faint curve where life was just beginning. This was supposed to be our happiest moment, the start of something beautiful. Instead, it was the end of everything I thought I knew. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me. The tears stopped, replaced by a spark of anger, white-hot and unyielding. Thane thought he could erase me with a crumpled bill and a lie. He thought I'd slink away, ashamed and broken. He was wrong. I picked up the $20, folding it tightly in my fist. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a fight I didn't know I had in me, for my child, for my truth, for the life we deserved. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, the pregnancy test and the $20 bill side by side, like evidence in a crime scene. And maybe that's what this was, a crime against my heart, my trust, my future. Thane's words echoed in my mind, but so did the ones he'd spoken months ago, when he'd held my hand and promised forever. Something wasn't right. He wasn't just denying the baby, he was running from something. And I was going to find out what. The next morning, the apartment felt like a hollow shell, every corner echoing with Thane's venomous words. I stood in the bedroom we'd once shared, staring at the half-empty closet where his suit still hung, crisp and mocking. That $20 bill sat on the kitchen table, a silent challenge I couldn't ignore. I wasn't leaving, not yet. If Thane thought he could rewrite our life with a lie, he'd underestimated me. But to fight, I needed answers. And I needed them fast. I started with what I had, his old phone, a cracked relic he'd left behind when he upgraded last year. It hadn't been touched in months, shoved into a drawer beneath a pile of unpaid bills. My fingers hesitated over the power button, guilt flickering briefly. Snooping wasn't who I was, but then I remembered the cold curl of his lip, the way he'd tossed that money like I was trash. Any shame burned away. The screen flickered to life. And with it came the first crack in his facade. The phone was still logged into his messaging app, a graveyard of conversations he hadn't bothered to delete. Most were mundane, work chats, bar plans with his law firm buddies. But one name stopped me cold. Lysara. No last name, just Lysara, with a string of messages stretching back 6 months. My stomach twisted as I scrolled, each word slicing deeper than the last. "Miss you tonight," she'd written in January, followed by a photo I didn't dare open. Thane's reply, "Soon, babe." She's clueless. My breath hitched. Me, clueless. I kept going, piecing together a timeline of betrayal that ran parallel to our life. While I'd been picking out paint swatches for the nursery, he'd been texting her from the couch beside me. "Can't wait to get out of here," he wrote in March. "She's starting to suspect, but I've got it handled." Handled. That word seared into me, hotter than the anger from last night. I wasn't just a wife he'd discarded, I was an obstacle he'd planned to remove. But the worst came from a message dated 2 weeks ago, before I'd even known I was pregnant. "If she pulls some baby stunt, I'm gone. You're all I need, Lise." My vision blurred, tears stinging, but I forced myself to keep reading. The final blow was her reply. "Good. I'd hate to share you with some brat." I dropped the phone, my hands shaking so hard it clattered against the hardwood. A baby stunt. That's what he'd called our child, my child. A calculated lie to justify his escape. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Thane wasn't just denying paternity out of spite. He'd been building this exit strategy for months, with Lysara waiting in the wings. $20 wasn't an impulse. It was the final insult in a plan he'd already set in motion. The rage came fast, a tidal wave drowning any lingering hope. I grabbed my laptop, my fingers flying as I transferred the screenshots to a folder I labeled Truth. Every message, every timestamp, evidence he couldn't deny. But I needed more. If Thane was this far gone, he'd left a trail, and I was going to follow it. I remembered the spare key to his office desk, taped under the nightstand, from when he'd locked himself out last year. He'd laughed about it then, called me his little problem solver. Now that key was my weapon. His firm was only a 10-minute walk, and with him gone, probably shacked up with Lysara, I had a window. I pulled on my coat, the weight of my belly slowing me down, but not stopping me. The streets blurred past, my mind racing faster than my steps. The office was quiet, the receptionist off for the weekend. I slipped into Thane's corner cubicle, the key trembling in my hand as I unlocked his drawer. Inside was chaos, pens, receipts, a half-empty pack of gum. But buried beneath it all was a folded lease agreement. My heart sank as I read the address, a sleek, downtown loft, signed by Thane Calver and Lysara Vorn, dated 3 months ago. They'd been living together, building a life while I cooked dinners he never ate. while I dreamed of a family he'd already abandoned. I stuffed the lease into my bag, my pulse pounding in my ears. But before I could leave, a shadow fell across the desk. I froze, turning to see Kayleith, Thane's paralegal, leaning against the cubicle wall. Her sharp gray eyes studied me, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Elawan, right?" she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Shouldn't you be packing?" My throat tightened. "What do you know about it?" I snapped, clutching the bag closer. Kayleith shrugged, crossing her arms. "Enough. Thane's been whining about you for weeks. Says you're delusional, clinging to some fantasy, but I'm not here to play messenger." She paused, her smirk fading. "I just don't like liars, and he's the biggest one I've ever met." I stared at her, caught off guard. Was she an ally or another trap? Before I could ask, she turned to leave, tossing a final line over her shoulder. "Check his car GPS if you want the real story. He's sloppy." Then she was gone, her footsteps fading into the hum of the empty office. I stood there, the lease burning a hole in my bag, Kayleith's words ringing in my head. Thane's car was still in the parking garage. He hadn't bothered to take it last night. "Sloppy," she'd said. I'd been blind for too long, but not anymore. I headed for the garage, my resolve hardening with every step. This wasn't just about me now. It was about the child he'd tried to erase, the life he'd tried to bury under a $20 lie, and I was going to make him pay. The parking garage was a concrete maze, dim and silent, except for the echo of my footsteps. Thane's black sedan sat in its usual spot, untouched since he'd stormed out last night. My breath fogged in the cold air as I approached, Kayleith's words looping in my head. "Check his car GPS, he's sloppy." The spare key from his office drawer burned in my pocket, a lifeline to the truth he couldn't hide. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather still carrying his cologne, a scent that once comforted me, but now turned my stomach. The GPS flickered on, and I scrolled through the recent destinations. One address stood out, logged 3 times this week, 47 Lyrian Lane. It wasn't the downtown loft from the lease. That was at 12 Vaughan Street. My pulse quickened. 2 secret lives. I punched the new address into my phone. A boutique hotel, 10 minutes away. Sloppy didn't even begin to cover it. I drove there on instinct, the $20 bill tucked in my coat like a talisman of rage. The hotel was all glass and glitz, a stark contrast to our crumbling apartment. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the wheel as I scanned the lot. And there it was, Thane's second car, a silver coupe he'd claimed was in the shop for weeks. Beside it stood Lysara, her auburn hair catching the light as she laughed, clinging to Thane's arm. But they weren't alone. A third figure emerged from the hotel, a man, tall and wiry, with a face I didn't know. Thane handed him an envelope, thick and unmarked, before the stranger slipped into a beat-up van and peeled away. My mind raced. Cash, a payoff. This wasn't just an affair. It was something uglier. I snapped photos with my phone, the zoom shaky but clear enough to catch Thane's smirk, Lysara's smug tilt of her head, and the stranger's sharp profile. Evidence was piling up, but I needed more than pictures. I needed to know what was in that envelope. I waited until they disappeared inside, then crossed the street, my heart hammering. The lobby was sleek, all marble and hushed voices. I approached the desk, forcing a smile at the clerk, a young guy named Gavrin, according to his tag. "Hi," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My husband forgot his wallet in our room. Can you let me into 312? Thane Calver's reservation." Gavrin hesitated, glancing at his screen. That room's under a different name. Lysara Vaughan. You sure it's a joint booking?" I cut in, leaning on the lie with desperate confidence. "We're married. Check the card on file. It's his." A gamble, but Thane was arrogant enough to use his own credit. Gavrin frowned, typed a few keys, then shrugged. "Okay, looks like it matches. Here's a spare key." He slid it across the counter, and I snatched it before he could second guess. Room 312 was on the third floor, a corner suite reeking of privilege. The door clicked open, revealing a scene that twisted the knife deeper. Thane's briefcase on the desk, Lysara's heels kicked off by the bed, a half-empty bottle of wine between them. No sign of the couple. They must have stepped out to the balcony or bar. I moved fast, rifling through the briefcase, papers, contracts, nothing damning, until I found a folded note tucked in a side pocket. Scrawled in Thane's jagged handwriting, Rydian, $5,000 now, rest after she's gone. Keep it quiet, Rydian. The stranger. $5,000 to make me disappear? My blood ran cold, then boiled. This wasn't just abandonment. It was a setup. I snapped a photo of the note, my hands trembling with fury, and stuffed it back just as footsteps echoed outside. I ducked into the bathroom, heart in my throat, as the door swung open. Thane's voice cut through the air, sharp and impatient. "She's not going anywhere, Lise. That $20 was supposed to scare her off, but she's too damn stubborn." Lysara laughed, low and cruel, then let Rydian handle it. "He's cheap and doesn't ask questions. She'll be out of our hair by next week." I pressed myself against the tile, barely breathing. They were plotting to erase me and the baby, like we were loose ends in one of Thane's legal cases. The bathroom door creaked as Thane stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the floor. I clutched my phone, the photos my only shield, and prayed he wouldn't turn the knob. The bathroom tiles were ice against my back. As Thane's shadow loomed closer, his voice a razor slicing through the air. "Rydian's waiting for my call," he said, his tone clipped with irritation. "If she's still in the apartment tomorrow, he'll make it quick." Lysara's heels clicked on the hardwood, her laugh a venomous hiss. "Good. I'm tired of her ghost hanging over us." My chest tightened, breath trapped in my lungs. The phone in my hand felt like a lifeline, its screen glowing with the photos and the note, proof of their plot to erase me. One wrong move, and they'd find me here, cornered like prey. The doorknob rattled, and I pressed harder against the wall, my belly a silent weight reminding me what I was fighting for. Then Lysara's voice cut in, sharp and impatient. "Leave it, Thane. I need a drink more than you need to piss. Let's hit the bar." The shadow paused, then retreated, footsteps fading toward the suite's door. I waited, counting seconds until the lock clicked shut, before sliding to the floor, my legs shaking. They were gone, for now. I didn't waste time. I bolted from the bathroom, snatching Thane's briefcase from the desk. Inside, beneath the note, I found a burner phone. Cheap, prepaid. The kind you ditch after dirty work. Its call log showed 3 numbers, one labeled R, likely Rydian, and 2 unmarked. My gut screamed this was the key, but I couldn't crack it here. I stuffed it into my bag with the lease and the note, then slipped out, the spare key left on the bed like a taunt. The hotel lobby was a blur as I raced past Gavrin, his confused, "Hey," trailing behind me. Outside, the night air hit like a slap, but I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands fumbled with the burner phone, dialing the first unmarked number. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered, crisp and familiar. "Caliph." "Thane," she said, then paused. "Wait, who's this?" "It's Elowin," I whispered, my voice raw. "I found your number in his burner. He's planning something with a guy named Rydian. $5,000 to get rid of me." Silence stretched. Then Kayleith's tone hardened. "That bastard. I knew he was scum, but this?" She exhaled sharply. "Where are you?" "Outside the Lyrian Lane Hotel," I said, glancing at the silver coupe, still parked across the lot. "He's here with Lysara. I've got photos, a note, everything. Stay put," Caliph snapped. "I'm 5 minutes away. Don't call the cops yet. Thane's got friends on the force. We need to bury him with this first." The line went dead, leaving me gripping the wheel, adrenaline surging. Minutes later, a sleek motorcycle roared into the lot, Kayleith's gray eyes glinting under the streetlights. As she pulled off her helmet, she strode over, her leather jacket creaking, and yanked open my passenger door. "Show me," she demanded. I handed her the phone, flipping through the photos, the envelope exchange, the note, Lysar's smug face. Caleth's jaw tightened with every swipe. "He's dumber than I thought," she muttered, then met my gaze. "Rydian's a low-life fixer, does dirty jobs for cash. Thane's not just running, he's scared you'll expose him. What's your play?" "I want him ruined," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos. "Not just for me, for my kid. He doesn't get to walk away from this." Caleth nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "Then we hit him where it hurts, his career. I've got a contact at the firm, Vaylin, who hates his guts. She'll get this to the partners anonymously. Add your DNA test to the pile, and he's done." She pulled out her own phone, typing fast. "But we move now, before Rydian gets his next call." I hesitated, then handed her the burner. "Do it. I've got the test results at home, dated last week. He's the father, no question." Caleth smirked, a rare crack in her steel facade. "Good, let's burn this bridge to ash." She stepped away, her voice low, as she spoke to Vaylin, while I watched Thane's car, half expecting him to emerge. The $20 bill in my coat felt heavier now. Not a mark of shame, but a fuse I'd lit myself. Headlights flashed in the distance, and my stomach dropped. The beat-up van from earlier, Rydian's, rolled into the lot, parking beside Thane's coupe. A wiry figure climbed out, scanning the shadows. Caleth's head snapped up, her call cutting off mid-sentence. "Alawan," she hissed. "Start the car, he's here." The van's headlights sliced through the dark, pinning my car in their glare. As Rydian stepped out, his wiry frame taut with purpose. Caleth's hiss jolted me into action. "Go," she barked, slamming the passenger door shut. I floored the gas, tires screeching as we peeled out of the Lyrian Lane hotel lot. In the rear view, Rydian's silhouette lunged toward his van, a predator off the leash. "Keep driving," Caleth snapped, her fingers flying across her phone. "Vaylin's got the photos, the note, the burner logs, everything. It's hitting the firm now." Her voice was steel, but her eyes flicked to the side mirror, tracking the van gaining ground. My hands gripped the wheel, sweat slicking my palms. Thane's $20 lie had morphed into a $5,000 death warrant, and I was the target. We swerved onto a side street, the city blurring past, but Rydian's van stuck close, its engine a low growl. "He's not stopping," I rasped, my belly tightening with every jolt. Caleth cursed, dialing Vaylin again. "It's sent. Check your inbox. Thane's done." She hung up, then yanked a slim knife from her boot, her smirk grim. "If he catches us, he's not walking away." The chase ended at my apartment building, a brick relic I'd refused to abandon. I skidded into the lot, Caleth leaping out before the car stopped. "Inside, now," she ordered. I stumbled after her, the burner phone and DNA test results clutched in my bag. Rydian's van screeched to a halt behind us, but as we hit the stairs, another sound cut through. Thane's silver coupe roaring in, Lysar at his side. They'd tracked me home. The trap was springing, but not how I'd planned. Caleth shoved me into the apartment, locking the door as Thane's voice boomed outside. "Alawan, open up. You think you can ruin me." Lysara's shrill laugh followed. "She's finished, Thane. Let Rydian end it." I turned to Caleth, breathless. "Vaylin, did it work?" She nodded, holding up her phone. A text from Vaylin glowed. "Partners have it. He's suspended. Investigation's live." Relief surged, but it shattered as the door rattled under Thane's fist. "You're dead, you hear me?" he roared. Caleth cracked the window, peering out. Rydian was below, pacing like a caged wolf, but she didn't flinch. "Time to bury him," she said, tossing me my phone. "Play the recording, loud." I fumbled to the audio from Chapter 2. Thane's voice, warm and eager. "I can't wait to meet our kid, Alawan." I hit play, cranking the volume, and his words spilled into the night. Thane froze mid-pound, his face paling as Lysara's smirk faltered. "What the hell is that?" she hissed. I stepped to the window, holding up the DNA test from last week. It's black and white truth, undeniable. "You're the father, Thane," I shouted, my voice cutting through his lies. "And your firm knows everything. Your affair, your payoff, your fixer." The door splintered as Rydian charged up, a crowbar in hand. But Caleth was faster. She lunged, her knife flashing, and drove it into his arm. He howled, staggering back, blood staining the hall. "You're outmatched," she snarled, kicking the crowbar away. Rydian stumbled down the stairs, clutching his wound, his van peeling off moments later. Thane's bravado cracked. "Lise, call it off. He's gone," he yelled, but Lysara shoved him, her eyes wild. "You idiot, you said this was handled." She bolted for the coupe, leaving Thane alone, his empire crumbling. He glared at me, desperation baring his teeth. "You'll pay for this," he spat, but his phone buzzed. Valen's leak had hit. A partner's voicemail echoed. "Calver, you're fired. Police are en route." I held his gaze, the $20 bill in my fist. "You paid me to leave," I said, voice cold. "Now you're the one running." Sirens wailed in the distance as he fled, his coupe vanishing into the night. Caleth leaned against the wall, wiping her blade. "He's toast," she said, a rare grin breaking through. "You?" I touched my belly, feeling a faint kick. "Alive," I replied. "And just getting started." The sirens grew louder, their wail a fitting requiem for Thane's collapse. I stood in the shattered doorway, the $20 bill still clenched in my fist, watching his coupe disappear into the night. Caleth wiped the blood from her knife, her breath steadying beside me. "He's gone," she said, voice low. "And he's not coming back." I nodded, feeling the weight of my belly and the kick of life within, a promise unbroken by his betrayal. The next morning, Vaylin called. "It's over," she said, her tone clipped but triumphant. "The firm's filing charges, fraud, conspiracy, you name it. Your evidence sealed it." I didn't need to ask about Lysara. Her absence in Thane's final flight told me enough. She'd cut and run, a rat fleeing a sinking ship. By noon, the police had Thane in custody. His smug facade cracked on every newsfeed. The headline burned into my mind. "Disgraced lawyer faces ruin over pregnant wife's exposé." The courtroom came a week later, a stark chamber where truth finally held the gavel. I sat tall, the DNA test and recording in hand, facing Thane across the aisle. His suit was rumpled, his eyes hollow. Lysara nowhere in sight. The judge, a stern woman named Isolde Varn, reviewed the file Caleth had helped me compile. Photos, the $5,000 note, the burner logs, my prenatal records. Thane's lawyer stammered, but the evidence was a noose he couldn't slip. "Mr. Calver," Judge Varn said, her voice cutting like ice, "you denied paternity, conspired to harm your wife, and abused your position. This court finds you liable." The ruling was swift. Paternity confirmed, child support mandated, and damages awarded for my months of hell. Thane's head dropped, the last of his arrogance bleeding out. I didn't smile, I didn't need to. The $20 in my pocket was victory enough. 2 months later, the hospital room was quiet, the city's hum muted beyond the window. Pain had given way to a sharp, miraculous cry. My daughter, Tindra, small and fierce in my arms. Her name meant spark, a light born from the fire Thane tried to snuff out. Caleth visited, her usual edge softened as she handed me a tiny leather jacket. "For the fighter," she said, smirking. "You did good, Elawan." I rebuilt alone, piece by piece. The apartment stayed mine, paid with Thane's court-ordered funds. I took freelance design work, my laptop humming late into the nights. Tindra slept. One evening, a knock startled me. Thane, gaunt and pleading through the peephole. "I'm sorry," he croaked. "Let me see her." I opened the door just wide enough to show the $20, now framed on the wall. You priced us out of your life, I said, calm and final, goodbye. The lock clicked shut, his shadow fading for good. Tindra's first laugh came on a crisp morning, her eyes bright with wonder. I traced her tiny fingers, the frame glinting beside us, a reminder not of shame, but of strength. Fane's world had burned, but from its ashes I'd forged mine. No lies could dim this dawn. If this story resonated with you, don't just keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.